The day my ex-wife walked into my auto shop, carrying nothing but a worn-out resume and a look that seemed heavier than the years between us. I realized life has a strange way of reopening doors we believed had been locked forever. I had spent 6 years convincing myself that chapter was over, that the pain had faded, and that the woman who once promised to stand beside me through every storm had become nothing more than a distant memory. But when I looked into her tired eyes, all those carefully built walls around my heart began to shake. I never imagined that the hardest repair I would ever face wouldn't be an engine, a transmission, or a broken frame. It would be my own heart. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters in life. My name is Nathan, and I owned a small auto repair shop just outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't a glamorous business, but every bolt I tightened and every engine I rebuilt represented something much deeper than work. This shop was built with determination after everything else in my life had fallen apart. Years earlier, my marriage to Rachel had ended quietly, but painfully. There had been no betrayal, no dramatic courtroom battles, and no screaming matches that neighbors remembered. Instead, there had been something even more dangerous. Distance, endless work hours, missed anniversaries, unspoken disappointments. Two people slowly forgetting how to find each other while living under the same roof. After the divorce, Rachel moved across town while I buried myself in work. I convinced myself that success would erase loneliness. The business grew, customers trusted me, mechanics respected me, my bank account recovered. But every evening when I locked the shop and drove home, silence greeted me instead of laughter. Success can fill your pockets, but it rarely fills an empty house. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, the office door opened. Rachel stood there wearing an old beige jacket, holding a black folder with the word resume printed across the top. She looked different, not older in a way that time naturally changes people, but worn by struggles that life had quietly carved into her face. She explained that the company where she had worked for nearly 12 years had closed. Bills had piled up. Savings had disappeared while caring for her sick mother. She had searched everywhere for work, but found only rejection after rejection. Finally, pride gave way to necessity, and she found herself standing in front of the only person she wasn't sure would even listen. I stared at the resume in her hands, but barely saw the paper. Instead, I remembered the woman who used to hand me coffee every morning before work. I remembered dancing with her barefoot in our tiny first apartment, because we couldn't afford furniture yet. I remembered promising that no matter what happened, we'd always choose each other. Somewhere along the road, we had stopped making that choice. She asked if I had an opening at the front office. She said she didn't expect favors. She only wanted a chance to earn an honest paycheck. I took a slow breath. My employees looked through the garage windows, pretending not to watch. I knew everyone expected me to hand her an application, or politely explain there were no openings. Instead, the words came from somewhere I hadn't visited in years. I quietly told her that I didn't want an employee. I wanted a wife. The room became completely silent. Her eyes filled instantly with tears, but not because she believed everything had suddenly become easy. Those tears carried years of regret, loneliness, missed opportunities, and unanswered prayers. Mine probably looked no different. The following weeks weren't filled with romance. They were filled with honesty. We met for coffee after work. We talked about every mistake we'd both made instead of pretending only one person had failed. I admitted that I had loved my business more than my marriage during those final years together. Rachel admitted that instead of fighting for us, she had quietly given up and convinced herself we were beyond saving. Neither of us tried to rewrite history. We simply accepted it. Forgiveness didn't arrive overnight. Some conversations ended with tears. Others ended in uncomfortable silence. But every meeting reminded us why we had fallen in love before life became complicated. We discovered that while time changes people, it also gives them opportunities to become wiser versions of themselves. Eventually, Rachel started helping around the shop anyway. Not because I hired her, but because she wanted to contribute. She organized paperwork, greeted customers with the same warm smile I remembered, and somehow managed to make the waiting room feel welcoming instead of ordinary. Customers noticed the difference. They weren't just coming for repairs anymore. They came because the shop felt like a place where people genuinely cared. My mechanics joked that business had never been better. They weren't entirely wrong, but the biggest change wasn't found in the monthly income reports. It was found in the sound of laughter, returning to a building that had spent years filled only with the noise of air compressors and power tools. Several months later, I closed the shop early on a Friday evening. I led Rachel outside behind the building, where an old oak tree stood overlooking the parking lot. Years ago, we had planted that tree together after opening the business. It had grown strong despite storms, harsh winters, and scorching summers. Looking at it, felt strangely familiar. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wedding ring I had never found the courage to throw away. It had stayed hidden inside my toolbox through every difficult year, quietly waiting for a moment I wasn't sure would ever come. This time there were no grand speeches, no expensive restaurant, no audience. Just two people who had finally learned that love isn't about never breaking. It's about having the courage to rebuild after everything falls apart. Rachel slipped the ring back onto her finger with tears streaming down her face. And for the first time in years, neither of us felt like we had lost anything. We had found home, again. The following spring, our family and closest friends gathered at a small country church outside Columbus. We exchanged new vows, not because the old ones had been meaningless, but because we finally understood what they truly required. Marriage wasn't built on perfect days. It was built on choosing each other, especially during imperfect ones. The auto shop continued growing, but people often smiled when they heard the story behind it. They believed Rachel had been hired as office manager. We usually laughed before explaining the truth. She had never become my employee. She became my partner all over again. Life still brought challenges. Bills still arrived. Cars still broke down. Difficult days still came without warning. But this time, we faced every problem side by side, instead of standing alone on opposite sides of the same room. Sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't finding someone new. Sometimes it's finding the courage to love the person you once let go, after both of you have learned what love truly costs, and what it's truly worth. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment, because your support helps these inspiring stories reach people who may need hope today. Special request: before you go, please comment with the words, "Love deserves another chance," if you believe forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. As the sun set behind the little auto shop that had witnessed both heartbreak and healing, I realized that not every broken thing is meant to be replaced. Some things, like old engines and faithful hearts, simply need patience, care, and someone willing to believe they can run beautifully once again. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson life ever teaches us, that the strongest relationships aren't the ones that never break, but the ones brave enough to rebuild. One day, one choice, and one act of love at a time.